Story 1: Australian Outback. Let's Not Meet Again by Big Pleb. The story dates back to July last year. It has enough weirdness that I find myself puzzling over what exactly happened quite regularly. My friends' reactions sometimes make me wonder if this is just a big, old, self-gaslighting experience, but yet when I go over the details, there's enough deep weirdness that it only leaves two real options. I'll let you be the judge. Anyways, a few years ago my best friend Toby took a cross-country grad position in Brisbane. A big tumultuous thing for our group of friends, and amid the 3 a.m. power-drunk confessionals and promises not to lose touch with, as well as a promise of the road trip. However, life found a way to make our drunk promises seem very disingenuous, and 18 months later, we'd hardly spoken, barring a few crowded hours when he'd flown over for a family obligation. Eventually, the stars aligned mid-July last year, and myself, Toby, and two other friends, Chris and Alec, were able to get the band back together, so to speak. Queensland is a weird mix of tropical paradise, dead space, crocodiles, and genuine social backwardness. Cheers to you, One Nation. Queensland is very, very much the Florida of Australia. And Australia is fucking huge. Not just huge, but vast and extremely empty. There's on average 3.1 people every square kilometer, and 90% of those people live in 7 or 8 major cities. If you think Reddit is an echo chamber, you've never had the pleasure of sinking a few cooling frothies with the good old boys in outback Queensland. The Australian geography makes it really easy to get 100% removed from society, and it's something I would often appreciate about this country, but the distance can be daunting at times, because if things go wrong, nothing is close. Everything is amplified by distance. Our plan was to fly in 4 dudes and cram 2 weeks worth of supplies into Toby's family sedan and straight book it roughly 1,600 kilometers north from Brisbane to Cairns. Being fiscally unendowed, on a time schedule, and outdoors inclined, we opted to keep driving most nights until we found an interesting and free campsite to pitch up, in which was a process of cross-referencing drive fatigue with the relative passive-aggressiveness of campsite comments on the Wikicamp app. Worth every single penny if you ever travel to Australia, by the way. Generally speaking, we opted for road trips, but one night, after staying too late in a particularly nice town, 1770 if anyone is playing at home, and reading a few particularly average reviews of the rest stop up the road, we decided to go off-piste and camp at an unmarked but seemingly well-known campsite. Around 9 p.m., we took off to a highway that Around 9 p.m., we took a left off the highway, followed the Wikicamp's directions towards our campsites, about 2.5 kilometers away from the Bruce Highway. Despite the remoteness, we found the campsite, a small 30-meter clearing between the banks of an apparently croc-filled river and tall gum trees, already occupied by a single caravan attached to a four-wheel driver. Being quite familiar with camping, I felt a little awkward intruding what I'm sure the caravan owner assumed was a private spot. Well after dark, and made a mental note to smooth over any grievances with a cup of tea and a good day, should we see the owner or owners before we left. We started setting up the campsite despite the frustratingly gravel-thick soil. I mean, have you ever tried to beat a tent peg into a rock? We weren't being particularly loud, but must have, however, attracted our neighbor's attentions, because he flung open the caravan door within 2 minutes of us arriving, and started one of the weirdest conversations I ever had. Expecting a gray nomad couple and a please keep it down, I was a little surprised by the 55-ish, bushy-bearded man that had approached us. He seemed erratically drunk and asked us if we had a bong, which we did not. I offered him a beer and he asked us where we were from. We mentioned Perth. He asked us our names and we went around the group. I asked him his name and he said, "Oh, don't worry about that." He then cleared his throat and made a joke. "You know, I'm a great gay prostitute." There was a mutual unexpected statement of silence. Yeah, I'm great, but the other boys don't enjoy it as much. And there was some awkward laughter afterwards. It is also important to note that Chris and Alec were not particularly invested in this conversation, preoccupied with tents. Minimal attention was being paid. Toby had more of an effort to engage, but was tending to his swag, and I was more or less solely engaged in the conversation. Despite the shit joke, which I chalked up to different cultural sensitivities, I asked him if he minded us camping here, and what he was up to tonight. He replied, "Oh no, I'm just watching the State of the Origin," which is rugby, by the way. "You know I have trouble making friends." He pondered for 10 seconds or so, and followed up with, "I used to have a good friend, but he was a cross-dresser, so I had to kill him." He said it so naturally that my general human statement interpreter again thought it was an off-joke, and auto-response had already kicked in by the time I realized what he'd just said. "Oh, how far is the river from here? Are we in any range of any crocs?" I asked before my brain could work out why I asked that. "Oh, only 150 meters that way, with the shallow graves. You know my friend knows where some shallow graves were in Harvey Bay. But yeah, being out there here alone, I wouldn't worry about the crocs. Do you promise not to kill me if I promise not to kill you?" This was enough to trigger my dumb lizard brain, and a very rapid understanding of danger kicked in. "Oh, do you think Queensland will win the State of the Origin? It's embarrassing to lose all 3 games. What's the score anyway?" I asked in an attempt to show I'm less scared of the snake than it is of me. "Good point. Just come knock if you have some bourbons and boys." He said, "Good point. Just come knock if you want some bourbon, boys," he said as he walked the 10 meters to his caravan. I immediately turned to Toby and asked how much of the conversation he'd heard. He said not much, but enough to be a little bit shaken. I asked if Toby had caught our bearded friend's name, and he replied he had not. I immediately insisted to my friends that we would take a walk to the river, despite Alec repeatedly saying, "I'll be there in 5, just let me finish my tent." I made it very clear that we needed to see that river right now. In the very remote dark, we huddled around a smartphone torch, and I explained the conversation I just had with our nameless mate. Alec and Chris, again, had heard only this guy being friendly and asking our names, and certainly did not understand why I was being so edgy. Despite my being fully aware that we were in an actual horror movie, I agreed to keep setting up and wait to see if anything happened. I immediately started scoping sizable rocks to use in a mano-a-mano fight to death, should it come down to it. 10 seconds after considering what a mano-a-mano rock fight would actually consist of, I asked Toby what should we do if our mate McTaylor had a gun. He paused very briefly and then very quietly and aggressively pronounced we were getting out of there. And we packed up extremely rapidly, one eye on the caravan at all times, despite protestations from Alec. We got out of there. I still have no idea if the guy was trying to play an old joke, and 4 mid-20-year-old guys, or if there's something more sinister to it. You can get away with a lot when no one is looking, and there aren't a whole load of people looking in rural Queensland. Either way, I'd rather not meet again. Update. My rational conclusion is that we experienced a very misjudged stand-up comic routine, but my gut feeling is the dude was bad news. I've done my fair share of cordial whispering, and this bloke just had a really, really greasy vibe. We all agree that it was probably not a situation where we were going to actually get murdered, but if an actual murder were to take place, it would probably happen exactly like that. Certainly didn't help. We explicitly stated that none of us were local, and no one knew where we were. Finally, in regards to the crocodiles, I'm from Perth. All I know is that Bob Cater seems to think there's a rogue croc lurking in every suburban pool, fountain, and waterway. Story number 2. I have a story I would like to share. Please bear with me as I'm typing this on my phone and really digging deep into my memory. I'm not sure if I had suppressed this memory or it was just long ago that I can't fully remember it. Background. I'm one of 7 siblings, so things are busy and ages vary. I must have been around 6. I honestly don't know if that age is right, but it just sounds right. A few blocks from our home, which was a really good neighborhood, it was a great, safe, quiet, wonderful place to grow up. There was a ma and pa grocery store. It was not abnormal for us to be left alone with an older sibling while mom or dad ran to the store for something, and could only have been gone 20 minutes tops. So this story takes place when my dad has my 4 younger brothers out for either errands or for fun, and my oldest sister, who is 30 now, was off at her friend's or something like that. It was just me and my sister, who is 4 years older than me. My mom had to run to Shorelings, which is the grocery store, and we were left alone. As I said before, this was the norm, not a big deal, and we were very mature and in a very safe area. So my mom is gone. All of a sudden, there's a loud pound on the door. I remember creeping around the corner and seeing the door move from the pound. The door was red, and the color made the movement seem so dramatic. Anyways, the pounding on the door becomes violent. Like even at 6 years old, or however old I was, I know this was not a good person and something was wrong. Then it went quiet. On the right side of the door is a metal mail slot. The slot opened and a voice yelled through, "Columbia Gas, anyone home?" I don't remember if it was a man or woman, just someone. My sister and I were frozen in fear, but our little simple minds trying to process it and rationalize it. We had stayed hidden. The pounding resumed and then stopped. Our house is fairly large. 9 people, but still tight for 9 people as we were by no means wealthy. And the windows were high from the ground so you cannot peer into it. All of a sudden, someone is walking the perimeter, slamming their hands on the door. At this point, my sister grabs me and rushes us into the downstairs bathroom, the only room in the house with a lock. You see, my dad had removed a lot of locks after one of us locked ourselves in a room as a toddler. The bathroom was next to the back door and had a tiny window over the toilet. That would have been a direct view of the garage if it wasn't tinted. We were in the bathroom huddled, and I remember very vividly kind of wondering why, and also that it felt like the scene from Jurassic Park where they are in the kitchen hiding from the raptors, and it was a little fun. But that ended quickly. Banging started at the back door, violently and persistently. I remember feeling scared when I saw my sister looking at a little window like she saw a ghost. I looked and saw a shadow cupping their hands, trying to peer in. The shadow moved and the banging resumed. Then the back door opened. It was left unlocked. I remember the footsteps being so heavy, like now knowing what steel-toe boots are. That was it. This person came in and shouted, "Columbia Gas, anyone home?" My sister had to hold me and cover my mouth. I remember hearing the footsteps stomp through the house. Once again, it was an old house where you can hear every floorboard. Someone moves upstairs and you can feel it downstairs. This person went all through the house, all the way to the basement, and finally they left. I remember hearing my mom's van come and running out to her crying. Later at dinner, she told us the Columbia Gas woman called her, and she said she was so sorry for scaring us, but she had to check the meters or her boss would be upset. I think that was her way of consoling us. So creepy Columbia Gas lady, let's not meet again. Story number 3, And Then the Bomb Squad Came, by Tstashe Gela. Some backstory. So for a while, I lived in a very projects area in Texas, and once the locals found out I was a disabled cinnamon roll who was stuck there due to my disability income being too low, they more or less created a wall between me and danger. This is why I'm alive today. There's a TLDR at the bottom. Most of my tenants in my complex were addicts at best, felons at worst, but they did their best to take care of each other. Most of my EP stories, no matter how silly they get, they saved me. This happened late October, late month. I'm diabetic and I was running out of food and passing out a lot. A new tenant moved in and offered to share. I didn't really feel very comfortable. He was an alcoholic and he liked touching. He told me he had a thing for white women and he was from out of state with a heavy Cajun accent. I think he was stalking me with intent. I kept my Discord chat on with my phone muted so I had my friends chaperoning if anything happened. It was maybe dumb of me to let him in and be around me, but I was falling consistently due to the lack of food and other health concerns, so I had some real paranoia about busting my head open. And I still didn't really believe this kind of monster existed. He actually didn't hurt me. He was gonna. But the other tenants started warning him off. They even hung out at my neighbor's place, and she hated company, so that they could hear if anything happened. They had rotations to keep me safe. I found this out after the fact and also by overhearing. To explain the set, we had one bedroom apartment, smaller than the crap motels, and set up like a prison cell. So them being in my room would be sardines. This all came to a head after I told this guy to fuck off, and if I tried to tell him to stop loudly, and he started screaming at me for daring to raise my voice to a man. He was pushing me around in the communal kitchen. He decided to avoid me and I was thankful, but I didn't realize how big of a bullet I dodged till the marshals came. A large, heavily armed squad arrested him. The next day forensics and bomb squad was here. Turns out when he finally applied for housing assistance, he had 3 outstanding warrants for his arrest, making bombs, and pedophilic assault. He was extradited to his home state for trial. I was his next mark. They removed the bomb stuff from his apartment. I gave the tenants some grief for being silly sometimes, but I would have been dead if not for them. I'm sure of it. TLDR, creepy stalker gets deterred by felonious but wholesome tenants. The naive cinnamon roll escapes untouched after marshals arrest him for building bombs and murder. Story number 4 by Seth. Suspicious woman comes to my house and another strange occurrence. So it was May 23rd and I was feeling quite sick at school, so I decided to come home. I phoned my dad and it wasn't until 2 p.m. that he picked me up. We were driving home and it was silent. He kept driving until he stopped a few blocks away from our home. I want to show you something, he says. His tone was very concerning and it made my stomach turn a bit. He passes me his phone and opens up an app that shows our surveillance camera in front of the doorbell. The camera reveals that the very front door, followed by a small, compact room to put your shoes in, and our actual front door leading to our house. It was 2 p.m. when this happened, so a few hours before we came home. A woman was entering through the door without hesitation and stayed in the small, compact room for exactly 40 seconds. She even took a look inside our front door. She was wearing this neon shirt, like these neon crossing vests, but an actual jacket, and a red cap covering her face. She was wearing a tag hung around her neck, but the tag had nothing on it. It was just a white rectangle laminated. Her hair was tucked into the cap, and the shadows blocked her face, therefore we couldn't really see it. She was holding this weird black machine. It looked like a walkie-talkie, but without the antenna, and without the other contraptions. It was just a big block of machinery. She stayed in the small room for 40 seconds and then left. Keep in note, she wasn't driving a vehicle, so she wasn't someone who did delivery and must have just stumbled across the wrong house. She didn't even ring the doorbell either. She just walked in and walked out. At this point, it was very strange and suspicious, but my dad and I didn't want to jump to conclusions and think it's some robbery or stalker. At least not right now at that time. So we decided to phone the government and ask if there was someone doing the water meter testing. I did this talking because my dad's English isn't very good. I thoroughly explained to the employee working what happened, and to see if it was anyone doing any water meter testing. The employee told us that he would come check with the company and see if they did it. Friday morning rolls around and we get a call back. Apparently they weren't doing water meter testing at the day. Another red flag was the employees come in the morning around 7 or 8 a.m. This woman came to our house at 12 p.m. Not only that, but the day before my grandpa saw her as well. Sometimes my grandpa comes to our house to collect some tools in the garage, and he saw the woman. The woman was wandering around in our neighborhood park early before reaching our house. Friday night, my dad calls my mom and I. My dad works as a general manager in a well-known buffet, and he recognized one of the customers as our neighbors just a few blocks down. He asked the neighbors if that woman ever came to their house, and they said no. We asked our next-door neighbor if it happened to him, and they said no as well. So why just our house? The neighbors get weirded out, and that's when they told us another creepy thing that happened. Apparently a few months ago in the winter, there was this dark gray Toyota that would park in front of our house at random times in the night and watch our house. A man would always sit in the car and do nothing for a few hours before driving away. The neighbors caught a glimpse of the event and got suspicious, so they decided to take a picture of the car and the man. Since it was the night, you could barely see the man to make up his face, and it was quite blurry. But the man caught them taking a picture and sped off in plain sight. He never came to our house again. Story number 5 by a Sleepy Goblin. Childhood Stalker. Last week I wrote an encounter I had on the train. This happened to remind me of something that happened to me when I was 12 or 13 that I had somewhat forgotten about and never really pieced the puzzle together. One day I was walking home from school when I noticed I had a voicemail on my phone. This was strange as I would never have voicemails, but I thought perhaps it was just someone who had left a blank message after staying on the call for too long. I put my headphones in as I plodded along and just listened to the voicemail. It was blank, but it went on for quite some time like someone had wanted to say something, but just ended up hanging up. So that's just what I thought, an accident. Later that night, as I was enchanted by my phone, I got another voicemail. I thought this was strange as I never got a call in the first place, so I once again listened and once again it was blank. However, you could tell someone was there holding their phone up to their face. This seemed to go on for weeks, and it seemed to get worse day by day. I would come out of school and end up having 6 voicemails. I would listen to the first 5 seconds and delete them. If they hadn't said anything by then, though. At this point, I started to get a bit paranoid. My childlike brain conjured up the worst thought. One of my friends may have been playing a prank on me, and I thought it was getting annoying. I asked around and everyone denied it, but I was certain that I would catch them out until a week later. I can't exactly remember what this voicemail was about, but I do remember it sounded like a grown man who was extremely angry. He would call me a bitch, a slut, and other such things. I was stupid, however, because I didn't tell anyone. I was embarrassed I had done something because I thought I had done something wrong. Day after day, I would still get threats, to the point where I no longer wanted to go to school, and I didn't even want to leave my house. The last voicemail was once again a man yelling, heavy breathing, and saying that he made my head spin. I'm coming to get you. I remember sitting with my back against my bedroom door as if someone was about to kick it down right there. And then I ran into my parents' room and told them I needed a new number because I kept getting weird voicemails. I told them I deleted them all and that it was bothering me because obviously they had the wrong number. I got a new number and no voicemails. After a couple of days of nothing, and I decided I wanted to go to see my friends at our hangout. We were all a bunch of goth kids, by the way, and this was the one spot where everyone would be. Even though I tended to stick out, I was always wearing heavy makeup and had teased hair. You could probably spot me from a mile off. I get on the train when a man starts to walk the full distance down just to come to me. He says hi and said that he liked my style. I felt like I knew him from somewhere. Something felt familiar about him, but I could not place at all from where. That's when the question started. How old are you? I'm 29. Oh, you're 13, right? I hadn't answered, but I thought that he was just quirkily guessing, so I said yeah. What school did you go to? Oh, you go there, right? Once again, I hadn't even answered. I felt odd. I just lied and told him that I used to, but I'd be going to a different school. So, where are you going today? Are you seeing anyone? I said I was meeting a bunch of friends, but didn't answer where I was going part. I started to look away. I no longer wanted to make eye contact with him. He ducks like like straight up bends over and tilts his head to keep making eye contact with me. I look a different direction and he steps in front of me, forcing me to look at him. It wasn't even his body. He just moved his face to wherever my eyes would go. I wasn't even speaking now. It was just a bit of a blur of him asking me questions then answering them himself. He seemed to know everything about me, even all the stores or areas I had visited in the past month. Adults all around me started to stare, and he seems to panic. There's a party going on at the library. Want to come? Obviously, I decline, and he gets off. I later find out near this library there are the dingiest alleyways and car park probably in the entire city. Months later, I hear nothing. A trend goes around about YouTubers Googling their names and seeing what pops up. I decided it would be fun just to do that myself, so I go ahead and Google my username that I used online back then, expecting to see nothing. Just a bunch of junk on the web pages, so I go onto my images and see a few months old selfie of me. I clicked onto it and it leads to a website that I didn't even know of. The photo doesn't appear to be on the site and its layout looks incredibly old. All there is my username and then a download link called map. I didn't want to download it in case it had some tracking virus on it or something along the lines. Well, that's what I thought at first when I first saw it. I panicked, closed everything, and nothing seemed to ever happen again. I also happened to get homeschooling after this for a while. It was very bizarre as that happened to me. I still don't know what to make of it. I still wonder what was on that file though to this day, though.